The most timid Omega was about to jump off a building. A breeze swept past and I gave a low whistle. Pretty in pink, gorgeous. Well, that did the trick. He didn't jump. Instead, he stormed over to find me, absolutely fuming with embarrassment and rage. Told me I had to take responsibility. While glaring at me with watery eyes, he even started quoting Alliance law. You have to be my alpha now. Otherwise, it counts as harassment, and I'll report you. Welcome to He History channel. Subscribe to follow all our latest adventures. Story begins. I was a lazy alpha who lived to eat and nap. That afternoon, like usual, I lounged on the rooftop after lunch, half asleep, basking in the soft autumn sun. Just as I was drifting off, the sound of a door clicking shut snapped me awake. Yawning, I cracked open my eyes and spotted a slender boy standing right at the edge of the rooftop. He hadn't noticed me behind him. A crisp breeze swept through the rooftop, tugging at his oversized school uniform until it puffed up like a balloon, briefly exposing a slim, pale waist, and strangely, 2 waistbands. Well, that was interesting. I gave a low whistle and propped myself up on one elbow. Beautiful. The Omega stiffened as if struck by lightning. He whipped around, wide-eyed, as though he couldn't believe what he had just heard. And I was practically glowing with curiosity. His whole face flushed a furious red. His shoulders trembled with indignation. Then, slowly, he began walking toward me. Up close, his cheeks were crimson, but his lips were pale. He trembled as he approached, until he was standing directly in front of me. I looked up lazily. He was trying hard not to cry. In that moment, I had one single thought. Damn, what a heartbreakingly pretty little thing. Tears and all. Why are you bullying me too? He asked, voice quivering. Just messing around, I said with a shrug. You Omegas are always so dramatic. Like I was quoting poetry, I sighed deeply. I clapped the dust off my pants and got up from the floor, shaking my head as I moved to leave. Well then I'll go. Take your time jumping. And of course, that made him cry harder. He grabbed my wrist, stopping me from leaving. You can't walk away from this, he shouted. This counts as harassment. You're an alpha, you have to take responsibility. If I had known that napping on the roof that day would get me involved with this clingy little O, I'd have skipped school entirely and cut the whole problem off at the source. Just then, someone tapped me on the shoulder from behind. Blake, they said. That Omega's looking for you again. Great. I was known in class as the god of naps, sleeping through every break. But I was being haunted by some random Omega. No more peaceful naps. He showed up every day, breakfast in the morning, snacks in the afternoon, and even late-night treats. If I didn't come out, he'd just stand quietly outside, refusing to leave. Now the whole class thought I was dating a male Omega. I ran a hand through my hair in frustration and stepped outside. Sure enough, Max Johnson was standing right outside the back door. Bright eyes. Pale skin. His soft hair had been tousled by the wind. It was a chilly fall day in Fairhope, and the tip of his nose was turning red from the cold. When he saw me, he smiled, eyes curling into little crescents. Damn it, he really did look like a proper little beauty. Now, I may be a shallow bastard who judges people by their face, but that didn't mean I wasn't thoroughly pissed off. What do you want? I growled, shoving him lightly toward the railing. He stood there for a moment, unbothered. Then he simply pursed his lips and handed over a paper bag. Breakfast. His voice was gentle, a soft lilt that grated on my nerves. I know you don't like eggs, so I didn't pack any. Added bacon instead. I snatched the sandwich from his hand, tore off a bite with a glare. If you poison this, I swear I'll end you. He blinked at me wide-eyed. So, is it good? He asked. I chewed through the rest of it in a few bites, washed it down with a gulp of milk, and shot him a dark look. This is the last time. If you show up again, I'll hit you. Every time. Most Omegas were timid. This should have sent him running and crying. And sure enough, his eyes welled up. I relaxed a little, satisfied. Problem solved. But then Max looked down for a second, and raised his head with stubborn determination. You won't, he said quietly. There was something unwavering in those eyes. And even if you do, I'll still come. You harassed me, he added. You don't get to walk away like nothing happened. I sneered, tossing back a cold, "You can try," before turning on my heel. Inwardly, though, I was already rubbing my forehead. There really was no getting rid of this little O. And well, he was an omega after all. In today's world, the post-differentiation system had widened the gap between the three types of people. Alphas, physically and mentally, stood at the top of the pyramid. Betas, unaffected by pheromones, had become the perfect worker bees, calculating, tireless, efficient. And omegas, small in stature, had the ability to release pheromones that could calm alphas and produce genetically superior offspring. They were, in the eyes of the law, a precious resource, which made them heavily protected. After all, in some ways, they were considered the hope of the future. But being protected also meant that equality was nearly impossible. The alliance encouraged them to stay home, go to baking schools, learn to nurture. Not to mingle in messy public schools like this one. Still, a handful of omegas insisted on studying at regular high schools. And Max Johnson was one of them. Logically speaking, someone like an omega should be treated with care by everyone around him. They were delicate, with slender limbs and fragile builds, like you could snap them in half with one hand. But the first time I ever heard about Max Johnson was because he was being bullied. We were returning some equipment after gym class. As soon as I opened the door to the supply room, a thick, musty smell hit me in the face. I pinched my nose and waved the air, muttering, "When's the school gonna fix this dump? It's like 1,000 years old." My classmate chimed in, "Right? They keep buying busted gear and calling it an upgrade." The lighting inside was dim. It wasn't until we flipped the switch that we realized someone was sitting in the corner on the gym mats. Pale skin, thin frame. He stared at us silently, face colorless and blank. I jumped. "Jesus. Say something, will you?" I thought this place was empty. His lips moved, but he didn't say a word. I went about returning the volleyballs and cones. The guy still hadn't moved a muscle. I frowned. "You like hanging out in supply closets or something?" He shook his head stiffly, then stood and shuffled out of the room. That's when I noticed the suppression patch stuck to the back of his neck. My brows lifted. An omega. My classmate nudged me excitedly, nodding toward the guy disappearing down the hall. "I think that's him. Max Johnson, right? He's the one getting bullied by those other omegas in class. Doesn't even fight back. And hey, not gonna lie, he's kind of cute." I yawned. "How do you even know it's him? You've never met him. All omegas look the same, frail and dainty." My classmate flushed, pushing up his sweat-slicked glasses like he'd found a rare species. "I'm positive that's him. There's only one omega here who gets locked in the equipment room and doesn't come from a rich family." He leaned in conspiratorially. "And besides..." I shoved him away. "Cut the crap and clean this mess up. You're a beta. Why are you getting so hyped?" After that, I started noticing Max Johnson here and there, getting shoved around on the track by other omegas. At the school store, dragging an absurd amount of snacks that no way he could finish alone. To me, it was just harmless drama. A bit of petty squabbling between omegas. Nothing serious. Just a waste of time. But then one evening, outside a billiard bar, I saw him being dragged toward the entrance by a gang of baby-faced omegas. And I had to step in. Seriously, a bunch of barely legal omegas walking into a bar? You think they're coming out in one piece? Assuming they come out at all, they might just end up as bonded omegas with some alpha they don't even know. When I got closer, I saw Max clinging to a post by the entrance, his face tear-streaked and his voice panicked as he begged not to go in. The others were chirping around him like noisy birds. I didn't even say anything. Just reached out and yanked him away. Ran a hand through my hair, annoyed. Scram. The group of short omegas instantly went dead quiet. I shot them a cold glare. They scattered fast. One of them dared glance back at Max from the corner, but he quickly shrank behind me in fear. Getting him out of there was already me being way too nice. I turned to look at him. He was sniffling miserably, wiping his tears with his sleeves. His eyes were red, his nose running. He coughed from crying too hard. He didn't say a word. Just stood in front of me and kept crying silently. And I got a little itchy just watching him. I couldn't help but brush his chin with my knuckles. He flinched and stumbled back, staring at me with wide, wary eyes. Just like a scared little bunny. I let out a low chuckle. Didn't tease him anymore. Just stretched out lazily and walked away, waving a hand behind me. That was enough charity for the day. Not even wind or rain could shake Max Johnson's determination to keep bringing me stuff. By day 5, when I saw him again standing behind the back door, I actually sighed, for real this time. An alpha beside me gave me a wink. Like, you bagged him already? I chuckled, dry and humorless, dark circles under my eyes like war paint. I dragged the kid into the empty break room and shut the door behind us. What the hell do you want? I shoved him gently against the wall. He trembled. He stammered. I gripped the back of his neck, my voice low and menacing. If you try flirting with me again, I'll snap your neck. He blinked in shock, completely stunned. Then his eyes reddened almost instantly. Tears began to fall, fat and silent. He dropped into a crouch, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. His shoulders shook with every breath. It was a while before he finally spoke, his voice muffled and low. I thought, you were a good person? And they said you're strong? I thought if I stayed close, maybe no one would bully me anymore. That's it? You're telling me you showed up every day just for that? I nudged his shoe with mine. And now? He sniffled, then nodded, still choking back sobs. No one bullies me anymore. I grabbed him by the arm and hauled him up from the ground. Then I said, continued in next part if you'd like me to. If that's all it takes, fine. I'll help you this once. But don't come bothering me again. I hauled him up, only to realize his face was completely streaked with tears and snot, like a crying raccoon. When he heard what I said, he started bawling even harder. His voice was thick with sobs. You're so kind. Blake Evans. Stop crying. Wipe your face. I'll walk you back, I ordered in a low voice. The Omega slowly quieted down from his storm of tears and trailed behind me, step by step. That your seat? I frowned, pointing at the one empty desk in class. It was next to the trash can, near the back door. There was nothing on the desktop except for a mess of random doodles and scratches. I glanced down at the clean uniform Max Johnson was wearing. It clearly didn't match this kind of seat. He pressed his lips together, looking like he was about to cry again. I ran a hand through my hair in exasperation. For the last time. It was just a damn seat. Why did someone else always have to speak up for him? How scared could one Omega be? Sit, I snapped, shoving him lightly into the chair. Some curious stares glanced our way. And I just so happened to recognize a few of them. Weren't those the same brats who tried to drag Max into that bar the other night? I raised my brows. Then I said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. According to the Omega Protection Act, no one is allowed to harm an Omega in any form. If I ever see anyone bullying him again, don't blame me, the righteous enforcer, for getting nasty. The classroom fell silent. A few students turned to look, expressions unreadable. Can't blame them. I was kind of infamous around here. Skipping class, getting into fights, dyed red hair, standing among these neat, uniformed students, I looked more like a delinquent who wandered in off the street. I tracked down their homeroom teacher, pulled her aside, and threw in some legal jargon about the Omega Protection Act. Then I leaned in with a smile and said, you wouldn't want Mr. Anthony to find out one of his teachers doesn't protect Omegas, would you? He might still have plans to climb the ranks. The young female teacher turned pale. She nodded quickly. Of course, Mr. Evans. I'll keep a close eye from now on. Max Johnson won't be bullied again. Honestly, it was just a small favor. Barely worth mentioning. What I didn't expect was how much it seemed to mean to Max Johnson. Several days later, he pulled me to the school gate and introduced me to his dad. An elegant-looking Omega in simple clothing, with a suppression patch on the back of his neck too. As soon as he saw me, he wiped his eyes and gave me a deep bow. Just like Max, always crying. I stood there, stunned. Speechless. All I could do was pull him back up. No need for that, sir. Really. It was nothing. But then the older Omega started waving his hands frantically, making a bunch of signs I couldn't understand. I blinked. Max, who had been hiding behind me the whole time, finally peeked out to explain. My dad can't speak, he said softly. He's asking if he can treat you to a meal. He stood beside his dad, looking hesitant. I know it might not mean much to you, but I'm really grateful. Just one meal. Please. His voice was soft as ever, gentle to the point of melting. And that pleading look on his face. Usually, I'd take the opportunity to crack a joke. Especially now that I knew this little wasn't actually expecting me to take responsibility. Every time Max brought me snacks after that, I'd throw out a teasing line. If you're really grateful, why not marry me while you're at it? And then I'd watch his pale cheeks turn pink as he lowered his lashes, not daring to meet my gaze. Honestly, it was kind of fun. But now, faced with one big and one small pair of hopeful eyes, I suddenly felt like the pressure of the entire universe was on my shoulders. So I just nodded quietly and said, all right. I thought visiting someone else's home would feel awkward. But lying back on their living room sofa, being doted on by Max Johnson, wasn't bad at all. I glanced around. A warm, neatly decorated two-bedroom apartment. A small tank of colorful fish swam gently in the corner. His dad was busy in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up. Max tried to help a few times but got shooed out every time. He laughed as he returned to the living room. My dad says I should stay here and keep you company. His voice was calm and light, always so soft-spoken. He bustled around, washing fruit and pouring juice for me. I rested my chin in my palm, lazily watching him flit from place to place. It was late autumn already. Most of the more delicate Omegas had already started bundling up in thick jackets. Max was no exception. But after moving around indoors for a while, he slipped off his coat. Underneath, his slender frame looked even more delicate wrapped in just a thin long-sleeve tee. I stretched out my hand and made a little air gesture, as if measuring the width of his waist. Max noticed and tilted his head curiously. What's wrong? He asked, blinking. Even the way he asked questions sounded like a quiet plea. I chuckled, saying nothing. Instead, I pointed at the red string tied around his wrist. What's that? I'd never noticed it before. But now that he had his sleeves rolled up, it stood out, bright against his pale skin. Max blinked his big watery eyes and smiled. Oh, it's a blessing thread from a temple. For peace and safety. You've never seen one? Even when he teased, he sounded so gentle. I let out a low chuckle and reached over to ruffle his hair as he sat down. Sure. You know everything, little coward. A single Omega, raising another Omega alone. He probably didn't have it easy growing up. I glanced over at Max Johnson, who was grinning like a fool. No wonder he's such a little coward, I thought to myself. Truth be told, since transferring here in junior year, I'd never planned to make friends. This place was never meant to be permanent. Fairhope was too small, too stagnant, a place no one really stayed in. But now, I found myself passing by the third floor across the way more often than I should. Pretending I was just walking by. Just to sneak a glance at the quiet Omega sitting inside, to see how he was doing today. Max Johnson still stubbornly brought me food. Most of the dishes his dad made ended up in my stomach. And since I'd already accepted so much from him, I figured the least I could do was walk behind him after school, make sure he got on the bus safely, just in case someone tried to mess with him. The bravest he'd ever been was probably the day he clung to me like that. But I didn't want to scare him again. So I kept it all discreet. He never noticed. After the final exams in senior year, winter break started. I dyed my hair back to black, got it trimmed short, and took a trip abroad with some old friends. We went skiing in a remote little town I couldn't even pronounce. Same crowd from back in the capital, familiar faces, easy fun. The day before we flew back, we were all holed up in a small chalet, playing cards and killing time. I hadn't seen these guys in a year, and naturally, they started teasing me the moment they could. So, Siming, how's life in exile? One of them laughed. Another chimed in, What do you think? He's probably dying of regret, got banished for beating the crap out of his illegitimate little brother. Bet he's eaten dirt since. I raised a brow and gave a grunt, but didn't argue. They burst into laughter, clearly enjoying themselves. Someone nudged my shoulder. So tell us, what's Fairhope like? Heard there's not even a subway. I lazily pulled out a card from the pile and said, place is boring, that's for sure. Oh, one of them said, intrigued. From that tone, sounds like the place is boring, but you might have found something interesting to pass the time, huh? I gave a soft laugh. Thought about it for a second, then nodded. There's this Omega. Kinda interesting. That's really all Max Johnson was to me at the time. An interesting way to kill time. Maybe he was cute, but not enough to make me stay. I flew back on Christmas Eve. When I stepped through the door, the family was just about to sit down for dinner. A delicate-looking Omega sat on the sofa. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up, and then welled with tears. Dad thought you weren't coming home, he said, voice already choked. I laughed. Come on, old man's still kicking. I'm the good son, remember? Had to show my face at least. Dad gave me a light slap on the hand, frowning. He whispered, didn't I tell you? Watch your mouth when you're home. Your father's still your best chance at survival. Speak nicely, it'll save you a lot of suffering. I scoffed, but out of the corner of my eye, I caught the Omega's bright expression. He was smiling as he looked me over, saying I'd gotten taller, skinnier, throwing out all the usual homecoming small talk. It had been a whole year since we'd seen each other. At first, I wasn't allowed to leave Fairhope. Then I simply didn't want to come back. I didn't want to ruin his mood. 5 minutes later, my older brother arrived. He walked in with a cold face, but when he saw me, some of that frost melted, and we exchanged the usual meaningless updates. Servants began bringing out dish after dish, laying them neatly across the long table. For all the undercurrents swirling beneath the surface, this Christmas Eve dinner looked peaceful enough on the outside. A warm, practiced harmony. No one dared mention why the patriarch of the Evans family was conspicuously absent. Grandfather sat with a dark face, glanced toward the front hallway, and finally said, let's eat. And then the front door opened. A rush of children's laughter echoed through the hall. Dad's face went ghost white. His fists clenched tightly. And just like that, I understood why my brother had looked so tense earlier. I propped my chin on my hand and watched as a tall man with shoulder-length hair walked in. Behind him were 2 kids, a boy and a girl. His bastards. The ones his mistress had been raising. He'd been trying for years to parade them in front of grandfather. The younger one, a girl, was bawling, being pulled along by a housemaid. The older one, an alpha boy, was all smiles and politeness. Good evening, grandfather. The man caught sight of me. And then his gaze shifted to the Omega sitting beside me, eyes already glistening with unshed tears. He paused for a second, then calmly ordered the servants to bring out 3 more chairs. People need dignity. Trees need bark. But some people don't care about either. Dragging illegitimate children to a Christmas dinner? He must have thought the evening wasn't lively enough. That thought was supposed to stay in my head. But the moment I realized what I'd done, the whole room had gone silent. Dad's hand was clamped down on my thigh so hard it hurt. I'd said it out loud. Loudly. The man still standing turned to me, face dark. Did you come back just to piss me off? He picked up a baseball bat, ready to come at me. Grandfather cursed. Dad rushed to stop him. My brother offered icy sarcasm from the side while staying alert in case things got physical. The uncles had no choice but to come out and say a few meaningless pleasantries. The farce ended with me smashing an ashtray across the head of that bastard Alpha, splitting his scalp open. Totally not worth the drama. At 2 in the morning, I stood alone on the balcony, wind biting at my face. Expressionless, I touched the fresh bruise on my cheek. I reached into my pocket for a piece of candy, but pulled out my phone instead. It had been broken since the moment I left the country. All my friends were still around, so I didn't bother thinking about my phone. I just threw myself into the chaos for a few more days. It wasn't until the day before I flew back that I remembered. My phone was dead. I drove into the nearest city and bought a new one. When it powered on, there were a bunch of messages. Besides a few from Dad and my older brother, there was one from a number I didn't recognize. Just a random string of digits. While I was abroad, he'd texted, "It's snowing. It looks really pretty." There was a photo attached, Fairhope, under a blanket of white. Another message came in just 2 hours ago. "Merry Christmas." It was followed by a lonely little firework emoji. Silly. Just like him. Staring at those texts, I could almost picture that slender little Omega. I imagined him blushing, eyes sparkling as he typed. Clingy in the most natural, unassuming way. Thinking about Max Johnson, I realized I actually wanted to tease this timid yet bold Omega. I didn't hesitate. Just hit call. It was 4 a.m. on Christmas's morning. The whole world had fallen quiet. He was probably asleep. The phone rang several times before he picked up. His voice was soft and drowsy. "Hello." I didn't answer, wanted to see if he'd get annoyed. There was a pause on his end. Then suddenly, "Blake Evans?" He still sounded half asleep, a little congested from the cold, but his surprise was full of joy. Sniffling, he asked slowly, "Why are you calling so late?" I said lazily, "Who's the one who added me over and kept texting me? What, scared I'd forget you or something?" He paused, then muttered defensively, "I didn't text that much." I laughed under my breath and didn't argue. Max had just been dragged out of a dream, but he wasn't cranky at all. Once he woke up a bit, he excitedly started telling me everything he'd done that day, using that soft, gentle tone of his. Listening to it made me want a cigarette. I reached into my pocket for candy, but all I found was a pack of smokes. I lit one. Immediately, his voice on the other end stopped. Then came a quiet, concerned warning. "Don't smoke. It's bad for you." I smiled. Sharp ears. "No wonder you heard me talking on the rooftop that day." That rooftop, where everything started. Max fumbled for words, clearly flustered. He stammered out, "Merry Christmas," and hung up. His voice, clear, soft, and sweet, lingered in my ears like a warm breeze cutting through the cold night. I looked down. The tip of my finger was burning. At some point, the cigarette had burned all the way down. 2 days later, with a mountain of warnings from Dad, I flew back to Fairhope. I really didn't want to stay at home any longer. If I stuck around, they'd probably drag me to visit that bastard child in the hospital. I landed around noon, went straight to my apartment, and passed out for a nap. When I woke up, it was already dusk. Outside, the sounds of fireworks and firecrackers echoed faintly through the chilly air. I was starving. Ransacked the kitchen and came up empty. In the end, I had no choice but to slump on the couch and wait for takeout, like some sad old retiree with no one to rely on. Just as I was wallowing, my screen lit up. "Coward," it read. I stared at the caller ID. Did this Omega have a built-in sensor or something? Did he just know when Blake Evans is feeling lonely today? I picked up the call, voice lazy. "Yeah." Max Johnson sounded unusually cheerful. "Blake Evans, can I bring you dumplings? My dad went to visit relatives and we've got too many at home." His voice was light and bright, mixed with the sound of wind whipping by. I could practically picture him standing out on his balcony, smiling like an idiot while calling me. What's there to be so happy about, bringing someone else dumplings? I didn't say anything for a while. Maybe because I was too quiet, Max called my name again, softly. "Can I?" This Omega was too smart. He just knew how to make people soften. I let out a quiet laugh. "Sure. Come over. If they're good, there's a reward." I thought this Christmases would be the same as always. Boring enough to make staying in bed sound like a great time. But I'll admit, when I opened the door and saw him, wrapped in a scarf, nose red from the cold, smiling through sniffles as he chirped, "I brought you dumplings." My heart skipped a beat. It sounds cliché, but that's what it felt like. The moment he stepped inside, he got to work, unpacking the food from the thermal container and arranging everything on the table. I didn't know what kind of filling you like, so I brought a few of each. I also made some dipping sauce. He went on and on like that. We were the same age, technically, but he insisted on fussing over me like a caretaker. Maybe that's just how omegas are. I sat down and grabbed a few dumplings, dipped them, ate them. Even took a sip of the warm soup he'd brought. My stomach, empty all day, finally settled. He sat down across from me, beaming as he unwrapped his scarf. His cheeks were pink from the heater. "Do you like them?" he asked, eyes wide with anticipation. I nodded, lifting the thermal container as I did. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a red mark on his palm. I asked, "Wasn't it heavy? Carrying all this?" My apartment was the farthest from the entrance of the complex. Non-residents weren't allowed to drive in. From the moment I called security to let him through to now, it had been at least 15 minutes. This wind-blown, paper-thin Omega had walked the whole way with a bucket full of food. Max quickly tucked his hand under the table and smiled, eyes curving into little crescents. Shook his head. "Not at all." Then he urged me, "Eat before it gets cold." A moment later, something clicked in my head. "How'd you know I was back in Fairhope?" Max gave me a puzzled look. "You posted on Instagram." That Instagram post? It was for him, a slap to his face. To make it clear that even if I died, I wouldn't go see that bastard kid. If this were the usual me, I'd probably joke around with Max, tease him a little. Say something like, "You sure care a lot about me, don't tell me you like me?" But this time, I didn't smile. Not even a smirk. Max Johnson, I called his name, seriously, for the first time. The Omega, who had just been smiling absent-mindedly, turned to look at me in confusion. "You sure care a lot about me, don't tell me you like me?" I counted 3 seconds in my head, thinking, if he blushes, I'll pretend it was a joke. But he didn't laugh. He didn't even speak. Just pressed his lips together and stayed quiet. There was no smile on my face, and his little face had tensed up too. The air grew still. His big eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I sighed, the decision already forming on my lips. I'll wash out the thermos and give it back. And after that, let's not see each other again. I'm not going to like you. I wasn't staying here. We both knew that. There was no ending for us. Better he sees it now than get dragged along with hope. I thought, given how sensitive Max was, he'd burst into tears. But he just sniffled, swallowed it down, and asked, "Are you still eating? If not, I'll take the thermos back." When he left, his eyes were red. He wiped his tears away and pulled his scarf up high. I offered to walk him out. He refused. For the first time, he snapped at me. "Don't worry. I won't ever see you again." Standing on the balcony, wind biting at my face, I watched that bundled-up little penguin disappear into the dark. And unexpectedly, a bitter emptiness rose in my chest. I smoked half a cigarette just to calm myself down. I had to admit it. Somewhere along the line, I'd started to like him. But so what? I wasn't going to marry some ordinary Omega from a remote town. That small flicker of affection wasn't enough to change the future I was chasing. I don't know what decision Max Johnson had made. But once he said he wouldn't see me again, he meant it. Not even once. Not a glimpse of him. Even during flag raising or walking past his class, he was nowhere to be found. Rumors started circling. People said I'd been dumped. I didn't bother correcting them. I was mostly just worried. That soft-spoken, too kind Omega might get picked on again. After all, the first time we properly met was on a rooftop. So whenever I had time, I'd casually swing by the 3rd floor of his building. More for intimidation than anything else. Of course, the rumors evolved. Now they said I'd been completely whipped and was chasing after him like a lovesick fool. Didn't bother me. Explaining would just be more work. But it seemed Max cared more than I did. A few days later, I found a sticky note on my desk. "Stop coming to our class. I don't want to be talked about. It's annoying." The handwriting was delicate, but the words, "it's annoying," were pressed hard into the paper. I stared at the note, half amused, half helpless. And strangely, my chest felt a little tight. Like a usually sweet-tempered kitten had just swatted me across the cheek with soft little claws. Final exams were approaching, and I had nothing better to do. When the weather was nice, I used to nap on the rooftop all day. Now that it was heating up, I preferred lounging in my usual quiet bar instead. Sometimes, my older brother would call, cold as always, but still pretending to care. Every time, the calls ended in the same tired pattern. You look like a waste of space. You might as well rot in that town. Still, he'd remind me. That bastard might be up to something. Keep your eyes open. Oh, I said. Does our esteemed father know? My brother snorted. He'd be thrilled if you dropped dead. That stung. I winced, frowning. Geez, bro, ever thought of how your words might hurt? He just clicked his tongue and hung up on me. I instinctively lit a cigarette, eyes watching the orange glow at my fingertips. His words echoed in my mind. That alpha, he adored his illegitimate son. But deep down, he was still rigid and old school. There was no way he wanted his empire inherited by an alpha born of some random woman. The bastard wasn't content to stay quiet. Kept making moves. But the old man? Too much pride to clamp down too hard. So he just turned a blind eye. I gave a cold laugh. What a perfectly imbalanced father. One who could tip the scales 90 degrees and still pretend it was fair. Unbelievable. But now that I was here, he could forget about leaving cleanly. After hearing that something might go down, I started sticking to the back roads. There was still over a month before I could officially leave Fairhope. I figured the bastard had more patience than this. On the day it happened, I knew right away. Someone was tailing me. I kept my pace casual, slowly luring them into a dead-end alley. And the second I turned around, a steel pipe cut through the air and came down hard toward my head. I dodged easily. One of the thugs tried to come at me again. I kicked him straight to the ground. What can I say? I didn't grow up soft. By the time I was done, a few of them were groaning in the dirt. I had some scratches, sure, but nothing compared to the wreckage around me. And then he appeared, Tony Evans. He stepped out from behind them, face dark, chest heaving. I should have brought more guys, he spat. Should have finished you off properly. I grinned, cheerful. Yeah, I was hoping you'd show. I kicked one of the bodies aside and picked up the bloodied steel pipe. Walked toward him slowly. He flinched, eyes closing for a split second. Still tried to act tough. If you hurt me, Dad'll never forgive you, he hissed. He knew I was in Fairhope, and he didn't lift a finger to protect you. Doesn't that tell you anything? He cares more about me. The fire in his eyes was manic, shining with twisted pride. I couldn't help but laugh. So this was the big plan my brother warned me about? He thought hiring a few street thugs would be enough to knock me out? What a joke. I gave the steel pipe a test swing, then brought it down hard. He collapsed like wet paper. Honestly, he fought back slower than an omega. And yeah, I'll admit it. The sight of blood gave me a bit of a rush. Enough to make me miss the glint in his eye, just before everything went dark. By the time I realized a thin figure had stepped in behind me, it was already too late. Max Johnson didn't make it in time to stop the blade. I had no idea where he came from. He'd just run in and shielded me. His skin had always been pale, but now it was practically translucent with pain. Still, he managed to say in a soft voice, I already called the police when the fight started. They should be here any minute now. I stared, stunned, loosening my grip on the bloodied alpha I'd nearly beaten to death, just in time to catch Max as he slumped forward, his stomach soaked with blood. The thug on the other side froze too, staring at the knife in his hand like it had betrayed him. He ran out by himself, he stammered, eyes wide. I didn't know what my face looked like in that moment, but judging from the way he started trembling, it probably wasn't pleasant. A surge of rage, the kind I hadn't felt in years, rose so violently inside me that I nearly snapped. I wanted to destroy them all. But the Omega in my arms. His hands were limp and dangling. I instinctively pulled him tighter. Was it just my imagination, or was his body already cold? He was still whispering something. I leaned in, trying to make out the words. It's okay. You'll be okay. I swear. Max's eyelids fluttered closed. His lips moved faintly. Let the police handle it. I pressed hard on the wound, trying to slow the bleeding, panic rushing up my throat. I didn't even get the chance to promise him. The sound of sirens drew closer and closer. His hand slipped from my arm, fingers falling loosely to the side. Outside the emergency room, waiting for Max to wake up, I felt like I'd been dropped into an Arctic storm. In the sweltering heat of summer, I was still freezing. I was an alpha. I could take a punch or two. But him? He could catch a cold just from the breeze. And now he'd lost so much blood. What if he never woke up? His pained, fragile face kept flashing in my mind. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood what it meant to value the word, like. Not long after, Max's dad arrived, face soaked with tears. He clutched my hand, sobbing silently, making hand signs I couldn't fully understand. But I remembered. Max had taught me a few words. Clumsily, over and over, I signed back. He'll be okay. I'm sorry. And in my heart, like a spell I couldn't break, I just kept repeating, he'll be okay. Finally, the adrenaline faded, and my body started registering the toll of the fight. I slid down the wall, legs giving out. Covered my face with both hands. Well now, what if he really didn't make it? Thankfully, the universe still had some sense of mercy. Max Johnson pulled through. He was still unconscious, but he was stable. It took everything I had to convince his dad, who hadn't slept all night, to go home and rest. I plugged in my dead phone. A flood of missed calls and messages popped up. My brother. My father. Even him. Same cold tone. Same self-righteous arrogance. I didn't know Tony came for you. But since you fought back too, let's call it even. Don't keep dragging it out. So he did know I'd retaliate, and wanted to preempt it with a warning. To make it more official, he even called me. I let out a bitter laugh. Just because he said it was even, I was supposed to let it go? What a joke. I looked over at the sleeping Omega, his breathing calm, his face soft in the sterile hospital light. I felt myself cool down. Then I replied to everyone. To my father, I simply typed, control him. If there's a next time, I'll cripple him. He didn't reply. Probably thought I'd given up. If I'd agreed too easily, he'd be suspicious. But if I pushed back just enough? That was more in character. Tony thought just because he was an alpha too, he could compete with me? Let's see how he feels when he's no longer an alpha at all. As for the one who stabbed Max, I clenched my jaw. Not a single one of them is getting away. Max woke up the next evening. His dad and I both breathed a sigh of relief. He barely sipped some porridge and soup before claiming he was full. When it was just the two of us in the room, my face darkened. He knew exactly what was coming. Looked anywhere but at me. I took a deep breath, doing my best to keep calm. You didn't have to protect me. I'm not like you. I can take it. But you, if something had happened, what would I tell your dad? He didn't answer. Instead, he started pulling the blanket back and moved like he was going to get out of bed. I'm fine. Really, I'm fine, he muttered stubbornly. I nearly lost it. I shoved him back onto the bed. For God's sake, just stay put. You're killing me here. Of course, that little stunt made him wince in pain and flop back onto the pillow. He looked like a ghost. But then he glanced up at me with those big, watery eyes and gave a soft smile. The guilt hit me like a freight train. I, Blake Evans, don't often feel guilty. If I stole something, it was because the other guy didn't protect it. If someone was nice to me, that was their choice, not my responsibility. I didn't owe anyone anything. Even after meeting Max Johnson, I still believed that. But this time, what he gave me was too much. And now he was gently hooking my finger with his own. I couldn't even bring myself to leave the room. He told me, still a little shaken, I saw them following you. I just had a feeling something was off. Good thing I got there in time. Then he smiled, goofy and bright, flashing his perfect little teeth. My heart clenched. I stared for a while before I finally asked, but what if something had happened to you? Did you even think about the consequences? Max went quiet. He looked down, lashes fluttering. I wasn't really thinking, he whispered. I just wanted to protect you. I didn't know whether I should scold him or thank him. I closed my eyes, exhaling deeply. When I opened them again and met his gaze, I saw a tiny version of myself reflected in those clear, autumn water eyes. I took care of everything. Stayed by Max Johnson's side until he fully recovered. By then, my return date was drawing close. He went back to school without issue, And when he wasn't cramming for finals, he'd still swing by to bring me snacks. Today was cool and breezy. I leaned against the rooftop railing, letting out a long yawn. The door creaked open. "You're here?" Max Johnson sounded surprised. I replied lazily, "Come on. Of all people, you know exactly where I'd be." He let out a soft laugh and slowly walked to my side. In my mind, I count 2, 3. As expected, his voice rose in alarm. "Your face, what happened?" I turned toward the startled Omega, meeting his worried gaze with a calm smile. "Got into a fight. Yesterday, I took Tony Evans down for good, crippled his gland. It cost me 2. I didn't walk away unscathed. His room had bodyguards posted outside. That man didn't dare make too much noise for now, couldn't ship him back to the capital just yet, so they put him up in some hidden private clinic. Took me a while to even find it. As for the one who stabbed Max Johnson, I was still thinking about that when something cold suddenly pressed hard against the corner of my mouth. I winced. "Ow." Looking down, I met the tearful eyes of the Omega. I joked, "What's that for? It hurts, you know. Don't you feel bad for me?" Max wiped his tears, then, like a scolding mother, jabbed my injury again and muttered, "That's what you get for fighting. I hope it hurts." Despite his words, the sorrow on his face wasn't fake. I laughed and caught his hand before he could poke again. Then I said quietly, "Max Johnson? I'm leaving in a week." He froze, blinking up at me, a fat tear still hanging from the tips of his lashes. After a few seconds, he said quietly, "That's soon. I knew you'd leave eventually. I just didn't think it'd be so fast." He looked crushed. I let go of his hand and shoved mine in my pocket, exhaling dramatically. Yeah, I didn't even get the chance to date a certain little idiot. Didn't get to tell him I liked him too. Max looked up sharply, completely stunned. His mouth opened, but no words came out. I straightened the collar of his school uniform for him. "So, what do you think, little idiot? Would you be willing to wait for me to become someone better? I'll be reporting to a military academy in the capital. Might even end up at the front lines someday. There'll be hard times. But I'll stand in front of you, take care of everything for you. Your heart doesn't lie." The slow realization had started the night he came looking for me. I thought I could brush it off, ignore the feeling. But holding him that night, feeling his body grow colder in my arms, I knew then. Some things, if you miss them, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Even if I couldn't offer him a stable future yet, I had to at least hold onto the possibility. Max, eyes red, nodded. A few more tears spilled down his cheeks, but he looked at me, steady, unwavering. "I want to be with you," he said. "I'll wait for you in the capital." A smile tugged at my lips. I reached out and gently wiped his tears away. Then I noticed the thin necklace looped around his neck, and couldn't help laughing a little more. He still didn't even realize I put it on him. Military school was brutal. I wasn't used to rules. I liked my freedom. But every time I felt like quitting, I thought of him. Of those letters, sent one by one, asking in that soft handwriting, "Are you tired?" And suddenly I had strength again. Even at the front lines, even when a jet went down and I was half conscious, blinking through smoke, I thought of my family. And I thought of my Omega. I thought of how, despite seeming delicate, he had flown across the country alone to the capital. All for a future that might never come true. Just to stand beside me. I thought of that summer, when I slipped a simple silver ring onto his finger. And he had looked up, solemnly saying, "As for the 2 waistbands," that memory jolted me awake. 6 years later, covered in medals, bearing scars, I returned to his side. We signed our marriage license. The day we went back to Fairhope to prepare the wedding, I found an old notebook in his childhood room. A breeze through the window lifted the yellowing pages. A new alpha transferred into class 5. He's tall. Red hair, tied in a high ponytail. He's napping on the rooftop again. Is that really comfortable? Didn't go into the bar today, because of him. He's not like other alphas. He says he likes me, but I don't think he even realizes it yet. I think I might like him a little. On the last page, One big phrase was scrawled in clean handwriting. Dream fulfilled. And that's when I finally realized. This story had started long ago. Someone had been quietly waiting for me in the dullest part of youth, too afraid to get close. But in the end, we walked through those years together. And both of us got everything we ever hoped for. The end.